Now joining me on set, I have two great people here, two great young people, I should say. I have Raphael Obonyo, who's a political analyst and a youth affairs, what do we call you, youth affairs specialist?
No, I'm a youth advocate.
Youth advocate,
Yeah.
yes. He's certainly done a lot as far as youth matters and affairs are concerned. And also with us, I have Diana Sifuna, who's the CEO of the Youth Agenda.
Yeah.
Really good to have you both here.
It's a pleasure.
All right. So let me just give a bit of background to our viewers who are watching. International Youth Day is coming up next week on the 12th, right? But every year, just the week before, countries like Kenya and a few others actually precede it with what is called Youth Week. So that's currently ongoing right now. And let me tell you about International Youth Day. In 1965, the nations of the world recognized that the imagination, ideals, and energies of young people are vital for the continuing development of the societies in which they live. 2 decades later, the UN General Assembly observed 1985 as the International Youth Year. And so there's been a lot of progression after that. And so we first want to begin by asking, why is this International Youth Day important? Because clearly this isn't an issue just about Kenya. It's a global issue. We can start with you, Diana.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Joyce. I would say that in any society, in most societies, the youth population is always on the rise, especially with the good healthcare services. So the younger population seem to be much more. What it is that we cannot let the youth not be part of the development agenda. And that is how then the youth became a people of interest. When you look at economic development, the International Youth Day, as you've said, emerged from the Department of Economic Affairs and Social Affairs, UNDESA, and that's how the young people then became key economic actors in the growing societies.
Right.
So first world countries do take note of the young people. Developing states as ourselves, the third world countries, also take note of the young people, especially knowing that about 70% of the population are the youth.
Right.
These are people below 35 years old.
Right.
So then that's how we became people of interest. And then we must acknowledge, what are their needs? What do they want? What are they saying? What do their voices count? Should we bring them to the table? Beyond inclusion, how do we engage with the young people? So that's how the International Youth Day came about.
All right. So, Raphael, tell us then about this year's theme and what Kenya Youth Week has been focusing on this week. I know you've been involved with that as well. So tell us a bit about the theme for this year.
Yeah, the theme for this year is transforming education. And this is rooted in Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 4. And it's largely about ensuring inclusive, equitable quality education, but also encouraging promotion of lifelong learning opportunities for young people. And education is so important for development, and like Diana said, we cannot afford to leave youth behind when it comes to development matters.
Right.
But for young people to be able to engage as full members of the society, then they need quality education.
Right.
And that's why United Nations found it fit to have the theme for this year being education.
Right.
And we know education is extremely important because of the knowledge, but also the skills that you get to be able to engage in the society, to be able to tap into the opportunities that are in the society. And so, as we celebrate International Youth Day, I think the issue is to flag out the challenges that young people are facing in terms of accessing quality education.
Right.
But it's also to identify opportunities that are there and that come about as a result of the kind of education that we provide. And I think it's also to look at what are some of the best practices, like Diana and I would say in the NGO sector. What are the best practices that can be scaled up? What are the best practices that can be replicated in other spheres?
Interesting. And we're going to be getting to that because actually, I did economics, right? And one of my grad school thesis was on TVET education and whether it's pertinent or not for African societies. There's a big debate about that. Maybe we can touch on that in a little bit.
Perfect.
But let's first talk about, you've said access, and you've mentioned specifically quality education being absolutely important. In your honest assessment, do we have quality education in Kenya?
Wow. Wow,
Go
that's
first,
a tough
Anna.
question.
To go first.
That is a tough question. To be honest, I'm a product of public education, public school education, 844, and I appreciated all the lessons I had to learn along with it. I do think that a lot of effort was made or pushed towards us towards getting good grades. And so I don't know about much learning that happened. Subsequently, after finishing my college education, I actually went and did diploma, which I felt was more intense and equipped me technically as a marketer, that being my first skill. And I felt like the diploma was actually quite intense and quite useful.
Right.
Now, when you talk about quality education, SDG Goal 4, I actually appreciate it as well. And I do know that every society, we must be very inclusive. So not everybody must have a degree, because that's the degree tends to equip you with managerial skills, how to manage and balance different values. But then we do need the technicians, we do need the camera people, the sound technicians, like in a studio. We do need the presenter, but we do need also other skills. I am also very big on knowing that education is not the only answer. And I would prefer that we all get training for what we need to do. And I would also like to see that people are talented and they get to live their talent and they get to enjoy their talents that they have.
Right.
For instance, again, I was a model for a very long time and I loved it. And it's just that in the Kenyan economy, I guess I was a thinker. So I thought I can't sustain myself economically, pay rent and do all these things on just modeling. So that's why I still had to balance so many things. But as our economy is still growing, there's going to be so many brands for you to be an ambassador of. There's going to be so many opportunities for you to, let's say, excel in whatever skill you want to excel. So papers are not just everything to me. Quality education is good. What about training? What about when I make my clothes? What about the seamstress? That person doesn't need to have a degree, but that person can earn consistent, good money. If they can just, do their job well, then they get referrals and this person and that person, and then they have a business other than staying at home and waiting for a job.
Raphael, do you agree?
I agree to a large extent. First of all, actually, this show looks like a revelation. I didn't know you were an economist, and I didn't know Diana was a model. Now I know.
Well, now you know, beauty and brains.
Beauty and brains.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Diana said, we are in the process of actually reforming our education system here in Kenya. If it was working, definitely we wouldn't be endeavoring to fix it, and that's why we have this competence-based curriculum, and because there is a realization that our education system has not been able to propel young people to their career aspirations, and many young people are actually dismayed. We all appreciate and acknowledge the fact that there's been skills gap. The learning that takes place in our schools. When young people move into the job market, they're not able to.
Relevant.
They're not relevant, and so we have to appreciate and actually acknowledge that our education system is deficient to some extent, and worse for young people who even move to the level of university, because the focus has been so much on the qualifications, on the grades that you get, more than the skills that are provided at school. And that's why the issue of focusing more on an education that can provide you with the relevant skills is very important. But also education has been so much about the formal kind of education, so that we do not appreciate talent. Creative economy is not appreciated in this country. There are people who are just talented in their own way. We know of people who are in soccer who are earning so much money, more than people who went to university and all that. We know that there are people who are just engaged in the fashion industry, but we are not putting a lot of focus on that. And so I think the new curriculum appreciates that and tries to fill in that gap. In fact, there's a study that was done Africa-wide that shows that 50% of young people who go to the university, who leave university, are not able to get jobs. You can imagine the level of frustration. And so we need to relook at our education system, of course in Kenya, but across the continent, and be able to provide young people with the relevant skills. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis also on TVETs, vocational training. And while before vocational trainings were seen as second tier, or for people who had not performed very well, there's now increasingly acknowledgement that TVETs are very, very important because they provide the relevant skills that are required.
Although statistically, globally, TVETs haven't actually been proven to statistically provide that much, okay?
But
Because
in
a lot
Germany,
of the
they've
times,
done very, very
Germany,
well.
fine,
Yeah.
but it's the entire educational system which is based on a very apprenticeship model, which we're not doing here. So there's also questions about how we're implementing the TVET, right?
True,
Exactly.
true.
But in terms of speaking as to the quality of education in general, I think that touches on a whole lot of different things. And part of my concern is, what are we doing for primary school level? As you see on the news a lot, NUT and TSC forever fighting, all those different complications about teachers and how well they are paid, the number of students in a classroom. Here this morning I've just read a story of a child who's been paralyzed by 36 strokes because of earning 81% out of 100, which, to be honest, is a decent grade.
Can you imagine?
So, you know, there's a question then about quality as far as all of those things are concerned. For kids to learn well, they need good and motivated teachers, right? So then does that then bring in the question of, is the entire system, beyond just saying let's not focus on the formal education system, are we saying that the entire ecosystem around our education needs to be addressed at all of those different levels?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you. Before TVET became a thing, because this is pretty new, before TVET became a thing, and we were all focused on the grades and, you know, how students are, how they perform, are they like in the top half of, you know, the performance? The question was soft skills. Before TVET became a thing, it was like soft skills. How do we equip our 844 system, primary school and high school, to have, how do we equip the students to have soft skills? And my thinking about it is actually that, what about the trainers themselves? What about the teachers? Do they have the soft skills? And that's where you're talking about human motivation. Are they motivated enough to actually take care of the kids? To me, I find that I think the most humbling jobs, and the ones that I think we should appreciate the most, are the ones for the primary school, the teachers especially. You can imagine handling one kid is dramatic, 2 kids is dramatic. Imagine having a class of 40 students and every kid has a mind of their own. And as parents, we leave the kids with the teachers for like 8 hours, sometimes 6 or whatever hours. So soft skills stopped being discussed, because now we're talking about TVET and this new research, and I'm impressed that you're telling me that 50% of it is still, you know, there's still question about it, whether it's being implemented right or whether the logic behind it is okay. But I do think that, yes, our teachers need to be motivated. I think we need to get back to being more human, being a more accommodative society. As parents, do we respect the teachers? When we pay school fees, do we just demand that they take care of our kids well? How are they compensated? How is the education system set? And it's sad to see the politics behind the, you know, the unions and the Teachers Service Commission. It is very sad to see that play out, because who gets hurt? It's actually the students. When they come from home and they're going to school, the teachers are on strike because they haven't been paid. Ministry of Education has done this. The students are the ones who suffer most.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we need to take a short break. But just before we do, I just feel like, you know, I think teaching is one of those careers that we really should honor, as you've said. When you're leaving your child in the hands of someone else for 8 hours, those should be some of the best paid people in the country, in my opinion, because you're shaping very young minds, shaping their attitudes, their perceptions, their self-esteem, their confidence, how they relate with other people. So perhaps we need to also shift our minds, because I think we've put in a lot of emphasis on be a doctor and be a, and nowadays, when our parents were growing up, I think being a teacher was a very honorable thing.
Yes, it was.
Nowadays, you don't hear young people saying they want to. I don't know if you've heard any young people saying they want to be a teacher.
Very few young people. In fact, every time I talk to young people, I always ask, what are your dreams? Who has dreams of becoming a teacher? But very few of them raise their hands. All of us want to be, you know,
absolutely
doctors and these great people. But teachers, like you said, are extremely, extremely important. And that's why even rolling out this competence-based curriculum has been very difficult, because we focus so much on the content, which is important. We are trying to focus on the students, which is important, but we are not laying as much emphasis on the teacher. So they are not, we are talking about new curriculum, they're not trained about this new curriculum, they feel like their jobs are at stake. And so I think we must also shine a spotlight and focus more on the teacher also.
Absolutely.
It's extremely important.
All right, guys, well, we'll take a short break, but you can send in your feedback and comments to 22999. Also comment on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya on Facebook and Twitter, and at Switch TV KE on Instagram. We continue with Viewpoint after this short break. Stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. Of course, I'm joined here by Raphael Obonyo, who's a youth advocate, and I also have Diana Sifuna, who's the CEO of the Youth Agenda of the Kenya Youth Agenda. Asante Sana, guys, again for being here on the show. We've been having such a great discussion, and even over the break, we were continuing with it. Again, talking about youth affairs here on Viewpoint today. And this is your chance to send in your comments, your questions, and your feedback about the things that frustrate you, as a young person in this country. What is it that you're really, really looking forward to? What do you feel that our leaders need to do to unlock things for you to be able to thrive as a young person in this country? Remember, there's so many of us. Competition is tight for the few jobs that there are. What do you need from your leaders? Do let us know. 22999. Now, someone here on SMS says, I'm in high school. What is needed to be known that as students we are being mistreated, like corporal punishment in school. Thank you very much for that. And you're asking us to discuss student needs. Thank you for that as well. Certainly, as I did mention earlier, there's a case of a pupil being paralyzed out of being punished very severely. A very sad story there indeed. And on Facebook, I have Zina Mwamodo. You say you're watching us from Mombasa. Asante sana. Iman James says, good morning. Retirement for the old men and women. You think that is what is needed. And Selassie Mpenda Rege, you seem to agree. You say, good morning, Full Circle with Joyce. Old men should get out of office to give youth a chance. Very strong sentiments there. Do you guys hear this often?
A lot. Actually, recently there was sort of a Twitter fight between the former CJ and Ezekiel. And I think the point was that, first of all, old people need to create opportunities, but they can also not impose their thoughts on the younger generation. And they they should lead by example, which I think is really, really important.
Right.
Most of our policy makers are pushing young people into entrepreneurship, yet themselves they cannot be able to engage in that kind of space. They haven't tested that space, so they have no experience in that space. Yet they are telling young people, don't study to be employed, study to create your own jobs. But they themselves are looking for employment. They don't know what that's like. So I think I identify with some of their sentiments. But also we should ensure that we create many more opportunities for young people, so that if you see public service now, it's no longer employing. In fact, they froze the employment. Some sectors has frozen employment for many years. That means that many young people who would want to engage in public service are not able to get those opportunities. So I think we really need to rethink how we can open up, free many more opportunities for young people.
But then that also raises the question of, are young people actually able to take up those roles? Diana, you're a very young person.
Yeah.
You've come from a modeling industry. You're now CEO of Youth Agenda. How did you get there? What are the struggles you're facing right now? Do you find, are there other young people, young women around you as CEOs that you're able to relate to? Or do you often walk into rooms and it's, much older women and they almost look at you with a side eye like, what are you doing here? Is there space? And when we do have that space, do you feel that young people can actually handle the demands of leading different things, taking up leadership? It's a fair question, because I think we always clamor for, I want to be this and I want to be that, but can we actually handle that responsibility?
Well, to be honest, I will start by quoting my favorite man on earth, and that's my dad, who is in his 50s, and he actually says that, daughter, I am still learning and I am still growing. And so I am grateful for the opportunities that presented themselves to me, grateful to have seen those opportunities and maybe tapped into them. But just to answer your question, I wish that the society was more inclusive, whether to women or men, especially young people, and just allowed them to come into the space. Everyone is still learning. No person can say they're complete. If we found, if we brought our president here, he would still say, I'm still learning some things, be it in leadership. He's also an economist like you as well. So be it in economics, because he studied microeconomics. And so are we able to just be inclusive and be patient with each other and allow the young people to grow and take up positions?
Right.
I sit in committees where I'm the only young person representative or the young female representative, and it takes me time to catch up on things. And I'm always with my notebook and taking notes and just trying to understand things. I cannot have the expertise and the experience that people who've done it for many years have had. Raphael here has worked in the youth space much longer than I have. I'm probably 10 months old. He's probably, quite a number of years old in the youth space. So when I meet with him, I am willing to have my ears more open to understand what he's saying. He's probably read more research than I have. You know, I'm still reading, I'm still catching up and still growing. And so it's the patience for us to accommodate each other. When you think of a young person, and this is for leaders, when you think of a young person, do you see problematic? Do you see unemployment? Or do you see opportunity? Do you see a young brain? Potential, thank you.
Yeah.
So do you see a young brain that is willing to learn and grow? And so, and that also speaks to now women inclusion. I have spoken up at any place where I've gone to, and it's only men. I speak up. Actually, I was in one of the nice committees convened by the president again, and it was a security anti-terrorism working group. And I stood up and I said, I counted, we are about 50 people in the room, and only 8 of us are women. And out of the 8 women, I was the only youth. To be honest, there was no other youth. Osido, our colleague, you know. So I was like, wait a minute. How do we include people? How do you have this conversation talking about anti-terrorism and how young people are the ones being used by, you know, the radicalists, and the young people are not here to tell you what incentivizes them to join such movements. So we must be part of the discussion. We must be included and be patient with us. Allow us to learn and grow.
And Joy, also, I think the emphasis has been so much on experience, which is important. But I think also as a society, we need to start appreciating that young people are not inadequate just because they don't have experience. It's also important to appreciate the fresh ideas, the creativity, the innovation, the energies and the dynamism of young people. It's
and
very,
I really
very
like
important.
that you've brought that up, because one of the questions we get a lot here on the show, especially when we're talking about employment, personal development, entrepreneurship, is a lot of young people feel that they have to have connections even just to get into the room or just for their CV to be put on the top of the pile. For you guys, is that something that you also hear? And how do we overcome that? Because if we're saying not many of us will have that level of experience, it's a question about potential, giving opportunity, mentorship perhaps. So what would you say to a young people really struggling with that question of, I don't know anybody, I don't have connections?
I think it goes back to the system itself. I think our system must start appreciating merit. Meritocracy is extremely important, so that you do not have to have special connections. If you have some level of qualifications, I think we need to give opportunities to people who deserve them and who are qualified for them. I think unless we do that, then everyone will be struggling to have some special connections. If you don't have an uncle who is in a big position, then you'll never be able to get a job. So I think it goes back to issue of merit. It goes back to the issue of values, you know, as a society. Is it about the person that I know? Is it that I deserve, if I apply, I know I have a chance of getting it because of my qualifications. And then for young people, I think just what I said, I think it shouldn't be about, no one should intimidate you because you do not have experience. You should be able to move into an interview and say, yes, I don't have experience, but I have fresh ideas. This is what I can bring.
Absolutely.
So that is also
as we wrap up, I just want a very brief answer to this question here by Hampshire on Facebook. Good morning. I think there should be a separate ministry for the youth because our problems are plentier. Do you guys agree? Because right now, youth affairs are lumped up into one ministry with gender, culture, all that. Should there be a separate ministry for youth affairs?
I mean, there are pros and cons of having a separate ministry of youth. There are advantages and disadvantages. There are people like myself have really pushed for the idea of having a standalone ministry of youth. That way you give adequate attention to youth. But we also know that youth, if you put it as a standalone ministry, it means that because youth is cross-cutting, you'll find youth in agriculture, you'll find youth in the issues of health and all that. So I think it's both ways. It's just how we manage it at whichever level. Whether you have an independent, a standalone youth ministry, which I really advocate for. I think it's so much about how you manage the issue.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Well, for me, it's actually in between.
Okay.
Only because I think that we should work with what we have. Demonstrate delivery, and then get moving from there. I mean, you've heard us being called out in the public because of what a young person did in a board of directors when he was put to sit in a critical board that manages resources for the country. And so that blunder then made us suffer. So how about use what we have? Professor Kobia,
I can't let you go.
Professor Kobia is doing a good job, and I love it. And she's an advocate for young people. So yeah, I
pause
like
it
what's
there.
happening. Yeah.
We're gonna pause it there.
Okay.
But thank you both so much, Diana, Raphael.
you.
Thank you so much for being a part of Viewpoint this morning. Appreciate your time and your insights. Guys, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back, getting to the top of the hour, our lifestyle segment, and today we're focusing on health and wellness. We'll be looking at 2 diseases that are claiming the lives of thousands of our loved ones: heart attacks and breast cancer. Stay tuned.